So I have better graphics than James. This is the first time I'm giving a presentation from something I made from my iPad. I did this once internally for our team, but we'll see how you guys like it. So it's all hand-drawn. I got a thumbs up, cool. The concept here that we're going to be talking about is just rewards and incentive programs and how we can generalize them. And there's a new concept that we've developed internally at UMA that we call the optimistic rewarder that we're going to introduce here. And just to warn you guys, this is a fresh concept. We haven't fully fleshed out every aspect of it, but in the spirit of ETH Denver, we wanted to introduce it to you guys and get some feedback. So I think there should also be lots of time for questions at the end. For background, I'm Hart Lambur. I'm one of the co-founders of UMA. We've done a lot of things over our existence from really before DeFi existed. What we are really focused on is this thing called our optimistic oracle. And it's an oracle system that you can ask any verifiable question to and get a truthful answer from. And we can use it to build all kinds of crazy things, this being one of them. So my core thesis, and I don't think this is super controversial, rewards and incentive programs are a really, really big part of crypto. I actually think all of crypto is basically a giant incentive structure, but specifically we've seen how yield farming or different sort of incentive programs have led to the very quick and rapid adoption of a lot of the innovations in DeFi and Web3. And I frankly think it's one of the coolest things we can work on and play with. And the core design pattern here, what all these programs have in common is just, hey, we take an action and we get a reward. That's it. Action, reward, action, reward. And to go through James, you like my graphics? To go through my great graphics here, we'll go back to the OG of yield farming, arguably, Synthetics with their staker contract. Some of you in the space might know that they have this standard piece of code that people have used all over the place to run an incentive program. And the contract's really simple. You put in some rewards, you stake an asset, a token, and you earn some admission rate. Super simple, worked great. This is the basis for a lot of yield farming innovation. But again, action, reward. We keep going here. We'll fast forward to our friends at Olympus. What's the concept here? Here my mental model for how this works, we're gonna stake an LP share, a Uniswap LP share that's like ETH. We're gonna stake it, we're gonna wait, that's the action we take, we're gonna wait 5 days, and then in 5 days we get some reward back. That's the structure. Worked pretty well until maybe it didn't, but it's super interesting. Curve. Our friends at Curve and their VE economics, I'm still not sure how to pronounce this actually, but their vote escrow tokenomics. What's the action here? I'm gonna go and I'm gonna take a token, I'm gonna stake it for a period of time, maybe 4 years. I get 4 times the voting power. Action reward. And then to plug some of the stuff we've been working on for a second, UMA has this concept of Kpi Options that we've been playing with. And a Kpi option is a pretty simple idea where you have a token, really a synthetic token, that'll pay out some amount of rewards if a given KPI or metric gets hit. And the cool thing about this is it can be a KPI or metric that's observable in the real world. Did your TVL hit a number? Did you get so many Discord users? Whatever it might be. But again, here there's an action and a reward we get. So my big claim, my big thesis here is that reward structures are really what's been responsible for making DAOs and DeFi and Web3 what they are today. Without these types of structures and these incentive programs, we just wouldn't have had the growth we have, and it's like growth hacking on steroids, and it's super fun. But there are problems. So it's a lot of work to program one of these incentive structures. I think this is, again, one of the most powerful things crypto's brought us, but there still aren't that many design patterns out there because it's a lot of work to come and code them up and write them in Solidity, and we all know how hard it is to find a Solidity engineer and all that kind of stuff. And once you code them up, they're brittle and hard to change. And so what we've seen, in effect, is instead of inventing or modifying these schemes, people fork them. They just copy them and change the parameters. I don't think that's a good thing. I think it would be better if instead of people forking them, they actually tweaked them and improved them and made them, different or newer or ran more experiments. The other point here, it's a bit specific to kind of my view of the world, is that most of these incentive structures we went through, they hinge on real-world events. They can't hinge on real-world events. There's no way to build an incentive structure that's triggered by a real-world KPI. Like, if your project is beating your competition, do you get more rewards or stuff like that? With UMA's Kpi options, we can do things like that, but a lot of these other programs don't. So what's the idea here? What we're looking at with this optimistic rewarder concept that I'll dive into in a second, is if we can generalize these incentive structures. Can we figure out a broader framework that we can use to do this action reward pattern, one that's super flexible and lets people tweak and experiment? And the ideal here, the blue sky scenario, is if we could get to a point where this is actually like a no-code structure, so that people could come and just invent the rules of their incentive program, and it would just work. And I think that's a pretty cool dream. We're not there yet, by the way, but I think we could get there. And so, frankly, in a lot of time around Lisbon and ETH Lisbon, we came up with this idea of an optimistic rewarder contract that we have gone ahead and written. It's actually been audited too. So what is the optimistic rewarder? Well, the idea here is we still follow this action reward pattern, and we tweak it. You do an action, you get an NFT. The NFT is not meant to be like a picture or pretty thing, although I certainly could, which I think is kind of cool. But the NFT is just meant to be a receipt that says, hey, you, user XYZ, did this action, and it's unique to you. And we can track your history of all the actions you do in the future that are associated with that NFT. So I now have a non-fungible representation of all the actions you've done. Then we can use that NFT and associate it through a set of rules, through an arbitrary rule set. And this is the part that's kind of important. Totally arbitrary rule set. An arbitrary rule set that says that NFT deserves X amount of rewards. And however we calculate those rewards is just purely defined by this rule set we specify somewhere. So I'll like wave hands and be magic about how we specify that rule set. But that's the idea. And so to kind of look at this visually, the idea is like let's just pretend we got this contract that's our optimistic rewarder contract. We load it full of rewards. We have the code of the contract says, hey, I'm going to take an action and I'm going to get an NFT. I get my NFT back for whatever that action might be. Go on with my day, and then I have some set of rules that I'm going to be able to use that NFT to claim those rewards. So what is this rule set, and how does it work? Our rule set is for these rewards, can be any set of verifiable logic. Anything that that we could objectively go and look at and say, hey, that's going to get me this many rewards. This rule set we actually enforce off-chain, which means we don't need to program it in a smart contract. And we enforce it, the way we enforce it off-chain is optimistically. And here's where I got to do a little sidebar into what does optimistic enforcement mean? What does it look like? How is it relevant to what we do? And this ties back to what we call our optimistic oracle. And the concept here is pretty simple. The optimistic oracle is a structure where I can ask a question, or in this case, propose and say, hey, here's how many rewards I'm owed. And as long as nobody disputes it, it gets set to be true. It's valid. So I can use this optimistic oracle to enforce this arbitrary rule set. I've written out, like literally, I could just write it on IPFS or something. So I can say, hey, I want to withdraw this many rewards. I have a challenge period of, let's call it an hour. And as long as nobody says, hey, you're wrong during that challenge period, my claim gets set to be true, and I'm allowed to withdraw those rewards. So this whole thing hinges on this concept of a dispute, and a dispute would get triggered to an additional stage of verification that we call our data verification mechanism, and basically UMA token holders vote on whether the outcome's right or not. We've used this optimistic oracle in production for a couple years now. hundreds of millions of dollars of value flowing through it, and it actually works surprisingly well, where people actually will dispute invalid data up to this other system. And so now we can use this to, again, enforce optimistically this arbitrary set of rules. So sort of toy, stupid examples, but let's define the set of rules as, hey, I'm going to stake some Uniswap LP shares, get an NFT, and my rule set says in 5 days I can claim that, I can burn that NFT to claim X tokens. Cool. I just programmed like an ohm fork that way. It's kind of cool, kind of interesting. I could write a second rule set that says, hey, I'm going to lock my voting token. I'm going to take my token, I'm going to deposit it in this optimistic rewarder contract, and I get this NFT that I can't do anything with for 4 years. Let's make that be my rule set. And then in 4 years' time, I can burn it and get my tokens back. But in the interim, I get 4 times the voting power. That's cool. We just programmed like curves, vote escrow, economics. So the concept here, what I'm trying to highlight, is this design pattern is extremely flexible, where we could program a lot of the existing reward structures that have worked well as tweaking them. So, okay, my point. The design pattern, my handwriting is awful here. The design pattern, the design space is huge. There's a really big space here that I think we want to explore. I think this space is relevant, not only to DeFi projects, Web3, but increasingly in the real world too. We invent better incentive structures. And this optimistic rewarder structure is designed to be super flexible. So let's like try to invent something maybe new here, just to showcase what this might look like. And let's pretend that we have a new DAO that wants to distribute a token to its holders. This DAO has some sort of staking mechanism associated with it. So we say, hey, day 1 or day 0, we're going to have this initial community, and we're going to distribute to all the early community members. We're going to give them an NFT. And this NFT says you're an OG. And once you have this NFT, you can now go, and the protocol gets turned on, and there's some staking function where you stake to earn some APY, let's call it standard yield farming. But this OG NFT gives them a 2x multiplier on their APY for being the original guy. So it's kind of cool, right? There's an incentive to be the original person. I get this multiplier. But then I'm just making this up, by the way, guys. So let's just then say that in order for that user to claim their assets, they actually have to burn their OG NFT. And I lose my 2x multiplier going forward. Well, okay, now I've kind of created a little bit of an incentive where I want to hodl, I want to stay invested in the protocol. I don't want to actually claim my rewards, because if I do, I actually lose my multiplier, my OG status. Cool, kind of interesting, right? Kind of a cool way that we might have incentivized early users to be supporters of the protocol and to stick it in the long run. And I'm just putting this out as like an example of something that we could invent or create with this arbitrary rule set. And some of you in this room might know that Risk Labs, the foundation behind UMA, has also supported or launched this L2 bridge called a Cross. It's at a Cross.2. You guys should all check it out because it's actually really awesome. Super fast, lowest fees, handles most volume. But we made a promise when we launched this that we're going to distribute these tokens, whatever a cross token comes, is going to be distributed to the community. And so we're quite excited to use concepts, maybe like the one I just described, throw them out in the community and say, hey, would this be a good way for us to distribute our initial tokens? Is that something that'd be interesting? So if you guys are curious about that, maybe come join the Across Discord, because we are literally building a community from scratch. Okay. I am going to leave lots of room for questions, and I'll wrap this up in a second. I guess I want to summarize by saying, like, okay, what's my point here? Rewards are powerful and impressive. Reward systems and reward programs have done lots of useful things for DeFi, but they're hard to tweak. This optimistic rewarder is our idea for a super flexible way to build an incentive program that's easy to tweak. You can design in this program any incentive structure that you can write down rules for. So if you can write down the logic, you could actually build that incentive structure. To go back to something I said earlier, the dream here is we actually get this to a no-code structure where you could literally write down logic, or maybe there's like a GUI to drag and drop rules, and it like visually programs the incentive structure you want to enforce. And then everything here, this rule set for your rewards program, is then enforced optimistically using UMA's optimistic oracle. So you guys can find me. Thanks for my talk. Thanks for coming to talk. You guys can find me on Twitter at Hal2001. It's also my mom's birthday today. I really doubt she's listening, but happy birthday, Mom.
We have actually 4 minutes for questions. So I will optimistically enforce 4 minutes for questions.
I think that's great. So go.